The apparel is what allows us to plant the trees. So that is the side of the business that ultimately drives the monetary side that can finance that. And then on the flip side, what the tree planting gives back is incredible storytelling, incredible narratives that we're able to lean into with our supporters and really tell incredible stories through it.
Derrick, I really appreciate you being here with me on the Social Entrepreneurship and Innovation podcast. For folks who are unfamiliar, would you mind introducing yourself and sharing with us a little bit as to what it is that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm Derrick. I'm one of the co-founders here and the CEO at Tentree. We are a tree planting company that sells apparel. And to date, we've planted over 50 million trees. We just hit that milestone. And for every product we sell, we plant 10 trees and we create the most sustainable outdoor lifestyle product we can. We view our product as being, the most comfortable with the least footprint.
Mm. Well, I'd love to dive a little bit deeper, even into something you mentioned there, a tree planting company that sells apparel. And another thing that really stuck out to me just in your bio and from other interviews you've been featured in, it seems you and your brother, when you were 16, you and your brother Kalen, you founded a tree planting company that ended up planting over 150,000 trees. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We, it was back when, I was 16 or 17 and we had a lot of people. It was around the sort of timing of Inconvenient Truth and Kyoto Protocol and some of those sorts of things. And we had a lot of people coming to our school sort of talking about how, the world's ending and, all these issues that we were faced with. And honestly, it just felt super disempowering. It was, a lot of people talking about the issues and it sort of felt overwhelming and like there wasn't a lot we could do about it. And so at the time, we kind of came up with this idea of saying, well, there's this market being created around carbon offsetting. And, we grew up in a community that was really resource driven and there was a lot of fear and anxiety around that. And so the idea was, well, let's sort of flip that on its head and let's do something good. And the idea was to plant trees on farmland outside of our hometown that you couldn't really grow much on and sell carbon offsets. And so, over the course, it was sort of our summer job through grade, 11 and 12 of planting trees, basically trying to plant and grow 150,000 trees and talk about carbon offsetting and calculations and all that sort of stuff.
Mm. Well, I'm wondering, what do you think about maybe your brother, in the environment in which y'all were raised, influenced you to take that kind of level of action? Because I understand the circumstances as you explained there. But for a lot of folks, especially maybe teenagers, it might kind of start and stop at something of like maybe the doom and gloom a little bit and some of that disempowerment you mentioned. But I'm wondering, what do you think is particularly unique about y'all's character, maybe the environment in which you were brought up that had taking such a level of action seemed to make sense?
Yeah, we're fortunate that we grew up in a household that, had a sort of entrepreneurial energy. We grew up in a family where it was always sort of pushing for those kind of opportunities and to chase these sorts of things. And, when we sort of said, hey, we've got this idea, the answer was, well, go do it, stop talking about it. But I think, when I look at sort of the character and how that influenced where we are today, my brother Kalen and our other co-founder Dave, when you sort of fast forward to the inception of Tentree, I think what was so powerful about what they kind of recognized was they took this idea we had, which was an understanding of the impact of trees and the impact of and the disempowerment around most environmental narratives. And their view was, how do we bring more people into that fold? How do we empower those people that, to your point, were the ones that would just feel overwhelmed and sit on the sidelines? And that's sort of been the belief for us since the beginning. Is we had this idea early on to plant trees and sell carbon offsets, but today our view is, how do we empower everybody to have an impact through trees?
Mm. And I mean, now here in 2020, correct me if I'm wrong, but y'all founded Tentree in 2012. Is that right?
That's right.
So 8 years into it, the grand scheme of things, that's not exceptionally long, but it seems like y'all have been exceptionally successful at doing just that, empowering so many people to make an impact. I think I checked the counter of trees planted at tentree.com today, and it was over 50 million, right? So what do you think has made y'all so successful at doing just that and getting so many people involved and inspired in this mission?
There's the concept, most people have heard of it, this idea of starting with why. It's the most influential companies, the ones that'll stand the test of time, are the ones that start with a vision, a purpose, and then they expand into what they create and how they sell it. When I think of us, and really what's made us successful as a business, I think of that sort of model. And really for us, our why is trees. It's what we said at the beginning, which is we're a tree planting company that sells apparel, not an apparel company that plants trees. And so everything we do is with the vision and the purpose of trying to plant more trees and empower people to be a part of that impact. When I think of how we do it, it's really through a community of people that we work to rally around this idea of being empowered to take a step towards environmentalism. When you look at the other missions that are disempowering, the world's ending, they're either not tangible, it's donating a percentage of this or that. There's a lot. As an individual, you can feel either overwhelmed or not really engaged in the mission. For us, trees are such an important symbol of our connection to nature. And we use that as a rallying cry to sort of create this safe space for people that want to take that first step. Because we don't want to guilt people for not being good enough. We want to help them take that first step. So for us, our community is really this idea of, it's a community of imperfect environmentalists, because our belief is that the world doesn't get changed by a million perfect environmentalists. It gets changed by billions of imperfect ones. And so you take those two things and you say, okay, if we exist to plant trees, and how we activate that is through our community, our what is really our product. And I think where that leads us is that our product could be whatever we wanted it to be. And in hindsight, frankly, there's a lot easier ways to plant trees than building an apparel business. But I think what we've come to recognize is that apparel is so much a reflection of an individual's values. When you look at how people shop today, they want to buy and vote with their dollars, and they want to buy brands that reflect what they care about. And so if somebody's willing to wear a logo on their chest that says Tentree or Tentree's planted, I mean, that's a powerful symbol. And then not to mention the fact that there's a sort of a flywheel effect that comes as more people see that, more people talk about it. And ultimately, we quickly realized too that apparel has a major problem around pollution. It's one of the most devastating industries we have in the world. And so not only could we be a force for good with tree planting, we could also be a force for change within the industry.
And I mean, you mentioned that there, that the symbol, that being a large symbol to wear the Tentree logo on your chest. For our video watchers right now, for folks consuming this on YouTube, they'll see my Tentree shirt that I'm repping today. The audio folks are missing out. But well, I guess starting then with the fact that y'all are a tree planting company, what does it feel like for you? What's the significance to have planted 50 million trees right now?
looking back 8 years ago, I mean, we were excited about 10,000 trees. We were ecstatic about a million. So, to plant 50 million, it's pretty incredible. I think the way we look at it, though, is we're just the vehicle. At the end of the day, it's the consumer, it's the person that's buying that product that's supporting the planting. And we're just making it easier to do so. And so, I mean, 50 million trees is incredible. It's a huge milestone. But for us as a business, our goal is to plant a billion trees.
Mm.
And so we believe that we can do that in the next 10 years. We believe that we can plant a billion trees by 2030. And so, for us, we're just getting started. But the other thing is that we sort of see these big audacious goals coming out all over the place, and everybody, it's kind of this it's almost like a sprint right now to see who can make the biggest environmental claim. And so, for us, as big as our aspirations are to plant a billion and having planted 50 million already, I mean, it starts with one. It starts with one tree, 10 trees in our case, and really the impact of that. So for us, 50 million trees it's empowering people all across the globe. It's providing jobs, food security, poverty alleviation. I've traveled to these sites. I've met the people. We're partnering in an incredibly close way with these organizations. And we're so fortunate to do that. And, the impact in these communities is incredible. And then the impact on our community here at home that, has that safe space to be imperfect environmentalists, I think is going to have an incredible impact too. So for us, it's just, we're so fortunate to be in the spot we're in.
I'd be interested to go into that particularly further. You mentioned the impacts that these tree planting programs have on the local communities in which these trees are planted. I think that tree planting in itself is something that is a bit more complex than what it just seems on its face. I think for a lot of folks, it's a great idea on its face. But as I've been interested to hear from you, and as well seen from a lot of the documentation that y'all have on Tentree's site, there's a lot of complexities in tree planting generally. And I'd love for our listeners to appreciate that as well. And so if you wouldn't mind, could you share a bit more the impacts that these tree planting programs can have, and as well maybe some limitations of them, or things for folks to perhaps be aware of?
I mean, I could talk for days about that. So when we started our company back in high school, what we came to realize was that we had built a business based on some sort of government program, and that government program never developed. And so we ultimately decided that business wasn't going to be, didn't have long-term opportunity. At the same time, we got connected with a global network of people that were using tree planting, not just for environmental or carbon projects, but for social reasons, like those job creation and food security and things like that. And what we saw, though, was that these organizations also weren't able to scale at that time. The sort of collective awareness of tree planting and the impact hadn't grown to what it was today. So for us, we wanted to build something that wasn't based on any sort of handouts, and it's up to us to create the product and the brand that will facilitate that impact. And so when we started the business, we've created our own projects. We've partnered on projects, everything from not-for-profits to university groups to parks organizations and things like that. And every project's different. Whether it be in Senegal, where we're working with an organization where we support local farmers in getting out of unsustainable peanut farming, where they're making $250 a year off of backbreaking work, into planting fruit trees where they're able to feed their family, make up to 6 times as much off their land as they could with peanut farming. And, they're lifting these communities out of poverty through planting fruit trees like mangoes, papaya, guava, cashew. Or you look at an area like Madagascar, which is one of our largest projects and one of our closest partners with Eden, that we've partnered with them for the last 6 or 7 years. And it's a village where 7 years ago, 8 years ago, it was 150, 200 people, of which it was a fishing village that was dealing with the impact of deforestation because they'd cut down the mangrove trees in the channel. And what they didn't recognize was that by doing that, they were effectively destroying the fish's habitat, and the fishing started to deteriorate, and they couldn't support their families. So with our partners there, we funded the planting of as many as 15, 20 million trees. And today that village of 150 to 200 is over 1,000. They've built schools, freshwater wells. There's other small enterprise starting, and probably the most validating part of it is that today that village is starting to return to fishing because the planting of mangrove trees in those channel has restored the habitat. And so, every project has these stories. There's not frankly a third world, second world, even most first world countries that don't have issues around deforestation. But the social impact and the impact on the livelihoods of the individuals in these areas are often so tied to the health of their environment, particularly in these areas where a lot of villages and communities still live so much off the land. And so really reforesting is supporting the ecosystem. It's educating people on the impact and ensuring it doesn't happen again. And for us, the way we always say it is tree planting isn't giving a hand out, it's giving a hand up. You're not giving a fish, you're teaching them to fish.
And so maybe it's along similar lines, the answer to this next question, but obviously you've learned a lot about tree planting and its impacts on local ecosystems, economies, and societies. And so I'm wondering what have been some of the greatest reflections or lessons learned or maybe understandings you've developed, things that you now know or understand about tree planting that you didn't, say, 8 years ago or even further back when you started the business when you were 16?
A lot of our understanding around tree planting has definitely developed into more of a global perspective, whereas when we started our business in high school is definitely more of a domestic or a local perspective. One of the things that we recognized pretty early on was that planting 10,000 trees is a lot different than planting 10 million trees. And the infrastructure and the things required for that are dramatically different. And the other thing was that, I can only sell you a shirt once, and this is an issue for all, frankly, global not-for-profits all across the globe, that, if I'm never going to see that tree, if I'm never going to see that well being drilled, theoretically, I could be sold that as many times as I want. There's not enough transparency, auditability in a lot of these projects. And so as our investment in tree planting and our numbers started to climb, we recognized that this could be a huge issue as we go forward, because as a business, we don't just say we're donating a percentage of whatever. We actually say 10 trees are planted. And that's a bit of a kind of fallible position for us to put ourselves in, because if it ever came out that we were only planting 9 or we were only planting 8, that could be a really meaningful issue. And so what we did was we invested and partnered with our partners in Eden, and we said, okay, let's build a tool that allows us to monitor this on the ground and ensure that those trees aren't being double allocated. They're not being managed incorrectly. And so it's effectively the world's first on-the-ground monitoring and verification tool for global reforestation projects. And it's built on distributed ledger technology, where somebody in rural Madagascar, Indonesia, or Nepal, as they go out to plant for the day, will take photos. They'll record how many trees are planted, how many people were employed. It'll be time, date, GPS stamped, and all that information gets pulled back into our system that aggregates it into maps, timelines, and basically digitizes each individual tree, which then you can effectively allocate that tree. And so it ensures that that tree isn't going to Cory, the same tree that's going to Derrick. And the idea is to bring a lot more transparency and auditability to global reforestation projects, because ultimately I think what that'll do is it'll bring rising tides sort of thing. It'll bring more awareness and more opportunity to the global reforestation space. So I think, what we've learned is that, if I were to sum it up, it's that, the solutions that are the small solutions don't necessarily scale. And in order to scale, there needs to be incredible investment in infrastructure, and you need to ingrain the communities in these programs as well. It can't be sort of somebody coming in and saying, this is how you do it. It's got to be a solution that supports that local ecosystem, that local community, and that works with them.
Mm. And so, looking forward, Derrick, I'm curious, what has you most hopeful or optimistic or excited about the work y'all are doing at Tentree and looking at these reforestation projects in near-term advancements?
I mean, there's no question 2020 has been a tough year for our industry, there's no industry that hasn't been impacted in some way. And I think of what has, if I were to say, has there been good that will have ultimately come out of this? What I think they're looking back is that as a sort of global community, we've recognized that the impact of collective action, whether it be in sort of the Black Lives Matter movement, whether it be in how, people are rallying to sort of help and sort of stem or flatten the curve with COVID. And I believe that coming out of this, that awareness will be transferred to the next sort of issue that we're facing in climate change, the climate crisis. And the reality is that trees aren't a silver bullet to that. There isn't a silver bullet, but it's a tool in our tool belt, and it's an important one. It's a natural solution. It's incredibly effective. It supports communities. It's, that hand up rather than that hand out. And it is going to be an important vehicle or an important aspect of our battle against climate change in the next few years. So I really believe that as awareness for that grows, that we can have an incredible impact and we can plant those billion trees.
Mm. And I guess with that sort of the planning and I guess strategic organizing that all that entails, I'm wondering what is the balance between organizing and allocating resources towards the business initiatives most directly, or maybe the revenue generating initiatives? You can change my language as you see fit with your answer, and allocating that same time, energy, effort, and financial investment in the reforestation projects. I mean, I know you mentioned y'all are a tree planting company in apparel, selling apparel, but I'd love to know how, especially in your position in the CEO spot, how does that kind of strategic weight get balanced?
I mean, there's no question it's super challenging to effectively sort of run two businesses in some sense. I think for us, though, we have incredible partners on the tree planting side, and we have sort of established understanding, knowledge, and expertise in that realm. And we've hired incredible people on the apparel side that really share our values of creating sustainable, durable, ethical product, and that know a heck of a lot more than we do about how to do that. So I think for us, there's no question it's challenging to balance. But at the end of the day, the tree planting right now is what is what allows, or excuse me, the apparel is what allows us to plant the trees. So that is the side of the business that ultimately drives the sort of monetary side that can finance that. And then on the flip side, what the tree planting gives back is incredible storytelling, incredible sort of narratives that we're able to lean into with our supporters and really tell incredible stories through it. So, I mean, they support one another. There's no question. Mm. But the apparel, if we run an apparel business in a way that is arguably different than others, but at the same time shares a lot of the things that make an apparel business successful. And then what we do is we just take the profits and the margin from that, and we invest like hell in planting trees and creating these tools and these systems to do it sustainably, and traveling to these projects to meet the people on the ground, audit them, and kind of pull those stories back to connect them with our customer.
Mm. That's interesting, because it then seems, especially this probably resonates with a lot of other folks in the space of like impact-driven business, sustainable business, that one, your business and impact, like they can't exist without the other, or Tentree wouldn't exist as it is today if you weren't focusing on one or the other, right? Like it just wouldn't be the same thing. So that's I like that reflection there.
And the way I kind of look at
go
it
ahead.
is
Sorry.
The product, the brand can sell the product for a while, and the product can sell the brand for a while. But where it becomes really powerful is when those both support each other. The tree planting, people aren't going to pay us to buy crappy product just to plant trees. Mm. That product needs to support it. And when it becomes incredibly powerful is when they start working in tandem and building together. Mm.
And I think this might feed into what might be some advice for really early stage impact-driven initiatives. Has the understanding for y'all and that the allocation of resources, one way or other, has that evolved over time? Did that look far different, in the earliest years, closer to 2012 than it looks now in 2020? How it is that you're choosing to invest. I'm sure that the quantity has changed, obviously, but maybe the strategy behind it, and how might that feed into some advice for other early stage founders themselves wanting to make an impact?
I mean, for us, I think as a business, you go through these different stages. There's the inception stage where it's an idea. And at that point, it's so important to be clear on the purpose and authentic about what it is you're trying to create. I mean, at the end of the day, we were 100% honest with people that we didn't know anything about apparel. But the apparel was the vehicle to do that. And that got people excited around what we were doing. And during that inception phase, you're really trying to determine, is there product fit? Is there market fit? What is there somebody that will buy this idea that you've come up with? And I think you see a lot of people trying to jump into purpose because they feel like they have to. It's table stakes. And I think that it doesn't necessarily resonate the way that it has, fortunately for us. And a lot of times it's because it's almost an afterthought. It's an add-on. And so for us, the purpose piece has to be so authentic at that inception stage, because it's so much more challenging to pull it in later as you grow. And you move from that inception phase to the growth phase, where you are trying to really test and iterate and I understand if you have product fit. And once you have product fit and people will buy that product, it's really about market fit and what is the customer you're going after? Who is the customer that this resonates with? And really trying to get to some form of growth. And at that stage, it's just all hands on deck. Everyone's doing everything. You're testing, you're ideating, you're figuring things out. From growth, you move to scale. And that's really when you figured out what it is that your customers care about, what that product market fit is, And from there, it's about creating the processes and the systems and getting the right people in the right seats to allow that to sort of take off and scale in a profitable, manageable way. Because the reality is what works in inception doesn't work in growth. What works in growth doesn't work as you try to scale. And so it's really kind of understanding at what stage you're at. But if there's one thing that I've learned, it's that the most important piece is that purpose that you try to ingrain in your business has to be foundational to what you're doing. And it can't feel like it's an afterthought. It can't feel like it's for us, it wouldn't have been authentic if we just were some apparel guys that wanted to create an apparel brand. And we felt like tree planting was going to be what made it more successful.
Mm-hmm. Have there, or I'm sure there are, but what maybe companies or other brands have y'all really kind of modeled or looked at closely over the last 8 years now, or kind of looked up to?
I mean, it feels like a cop out, but there's no question Patagonia is kind of, one of that sort of gold standard businesses that has always focused on giving back in a authentic way. They've always focused on sort of doing what they believe is right. And you know what? They've also been incredibly proficient at communicating that. And I think they're a great example of when the purpose and the product sort of join and that mission and story really resonate. The "don't buy this jacket" type messaging is, though they leaned into their purpose and it sold the product. And other groups, like we're close with some of the guys at Bombas, and I think they're a great example of a organization that was built on an idea of giving back, and it was from day one, and they designed their product to be the right product for their give back, because that's what they wanted to solve for. They didn't just say, okay, I'll take any old sock and donate it. They developed and designed an incredible sock to give back to homeless shelters because they recognized that it was a huge need. So I think like those are two examples of brands that have kind of woven the impact in from day one.
And so what I understand, Derrick, is that soon after you graduated from university, you founded Tentree with your two other co-founders. I'm wondering what sort of kind of deliberate or focused development have you taken on to be a more effective CEO over that time, outside of maybe just the lived experience of doing it?
Yeah. I feel like in a startup, I've probably had, 2 or 3 different careers as CEO already within the organization. And frankly, it's been challenging to sort of recognize at what stage we were at as an organization and what the organization and the team needed from me to be effective. There's the days of sort of wartime management where you're just sort of like, you've got to plug in and make decisions. There's times where, we're just testing and everyone's wearing a ton of hats and I'm, the CEO, but really at the end of the day, I'm running warehousing, I'm running sourcing, production, things like that. But I think what's kind of where we're at today is really my job is to get the team excited about where we're headed and put the right people in the right spots to succeed and make sure that we're taking down the barriers for their success. And so I think for me, the growth that I've experienced has been, frankly, a byproduct of just being connected within the community and talking to people that have been there before and people being incredibly generous with their time and with their experience to sort of share how they've grown, how they've evolved and what they've learned in their sort of, and mentor me in that and that sort of thing. So it's been, I think there is such a culture in the entrepreneurial space and particularly in the social and give back space of giving back to people that are kind of coming up, and I've been fortunate to really have a lot of great people that have supported me in this journey.
Mm. That's repeated quite a bit from many of our podcast guests here. It's quite the generous ecosystem. Well, Derrick, I really appreciate your time. But before we wrap up, could I hit you with a couple rapid fire questions?
Sure.
All right. Well, first off, what's a book that you always come back to, or maybe something that's impacted you recently that you'd like to recommend?
A book that actually I really enjoyed was it was called The Messy Middle, and I can't recall the name of the author at this stage, but it's basically a sort of reflection on the journey of building a business, and it talks about we have this, you know, when you're talking about PR and who's getting the news, they're the ones that either fizzle or the survivorship bias. And everybody thinks that every business just explodes and has this incredible exit. Nobody really talks about the journey along the way and that messy middle. And so it's a fun reflection as well as a bit cathartic, because we've definitely gone through a lot of it and are.
It's a good one. We'll have that linked up. Next one for you. Are there any particular daily habits or morning routines that you absolutely have to stick to?
For me, I like to get up pretty early and wake up. Try to kind of get to the gym is important for me. It doesn't always happen in the mornings, but whenever possible, I like to sort of get to the gym early and get, into the office, whether that office now be at home or, me being alone in our office. Get in early and get the day started.
And one other one for you. What's maybe one piece of advice that you'd give to another social entrepreneur, purpose-driven business leader for us to finish up with here?
I think I already leaned into and it's such a buzzword, so I hate using it, but making sure your purpose is authentic and it's not just a sort of add-on. But if I were to take a different approach, the piece of feedback and advice that I kind of really honed in on in the past is this idea that, treat decisions like doors. You can walk through it and you can walk back through it. And, for me, I feel like as a business owner, when you're starting a business, every decision feels like it's, the end of the world if it goes wrong. And it can feel incredibly overwhelming, and you're going to face decision fatigue every single day. And it's a discipline to actually reflect on every decision and say, this isn't going, I can make this decision, and if it doesn't work out, there's ways I can walk it back. And I think that's been incredibly powerful to me as sort of co-founder and building a business. It allows you to sort of de-stress and de-escalate those decisions, and allows you to move faster and take more risks.
Excellent advice for us to end on. And finally, Derrick, anything specifically you'd like to direct folks to keep up with you and Tentree right now?
Yeah, check us out on social media, Instagram. Take a look at the website, check out the product. We'd love to have everybody kind of come and plant some trees with us. But at the end of the day, we just hit our 50 million tree milestone, and it's a huge milestone for us. And we're super excited to celebrate that, and would love to have everybody come plant some trees with us.
All right. We'll have everything linked up at the show notes at growensemble.com so folks can come plant some trees with y'all.